He kicked out his pregnant wife for secret lover, unaware she was heiress to $50 million fortune. Cry louder if you want. Collapse for all I care. Take your child and your misery somewhere else. You'll never burden me again. You mean nothing now? Leave. That was the venom her husband spat, as she clutched her stomach in agony. While she begged for help, he slammed the door. Where there should have been comfort, there was cruelty. Where there should have been protection, there was betrayal. In her darkest moment, he abandoned her, believing he had ended her life with a single act of rejection. But what he failed to see was that the woman he cast out in pain would not stay broken. She would rise higher than he ever dreamed possible, and her return would dismantle everything he thought he had built. Those who are thrown away often return stronger, and sometimes the woman you thought was powerless becomes the one whose shadow you can never outrun. Before we begin, kindly subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how this touched you. The rain was pouring outside, splashing against the cracked pavement when Emily staggered out of the front door, clutching her swollen belly. Her body screamed in agony. Her contractions had started hours earlier. What she needed was comfort, the steady hand of her husband, Daniel, the man she had once believed would stand by her forever. Instead, she got venom. Daniel's face twisted with cold disgust as he pointed toward the door. "Don't you dare cry to me now! You wanted this baby, not me. I have a new life waiting, and you're not in it." Emily tried to steady herself, her tears mixing with the rain. "Daniel, please, at least call someone." "The baby," he cut her off with a sneer. "That child is your burden, not mine. Go scream in some hospital hallway if you must, but not here. I'm done being chained to your misery." Inside the house, Emily caught a glimpse of another figure standing behind him. Claire. The mistress. Dressed in a silk robe, her lips curved into a smug smile, as if she had already claimed the throne Emily had been thrown from. Claire's hand rested lightly on Daniel's arm, her eyes sharp with triumph. Emily's knees buckled as another wave of pain ripped through her. She stumbled, reaching for the doorframe for balance, but Daniel shoved her hand off. "Don't dirty my house anymore." "Get out!" The door slammed shut, leaving her outside in the storm, the contractions intensifying. Every fiber of her body ached, but what hurt more than the labor was the betrayal. Her heart broke in 1,000 pieces as she realized this wasn't just abandonment. It was war. She staggered down the street, rain soaking her clothes, headlights blinding her as cars rushed by. No one stopped. People glanced but hurried on. The world had turned its back just as Daniel had. She was utterly alone, her vision blurred, her breath ragged. I can't do this alone," she whispered. But she had no choice. The baby was coming, and the man who vowed to love her was now laughing in another woman's arms. Emily clenched her jaw, summoning the last of her strength. This was not the end. It was the brutal beginning of something far bigger. As another contraction doubled her over, Emily collapsed on the wet sidewalk. Just as headlights slowed and a stranger's voice shouted, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Emily blinked against the rain, the stranger's shadow hovering above her. A man in his late 50s crouched down, his umbrella shaking in the wind. His eyes were kind but nervous. "You're in labor," he muttered, glancing at her belly. "Where's your husband? Where's your family?" The question struck harder than the contractions. Emily shook her head weakly, rain dripping down her pale cheeks. "No one. There's no one." The man's eyes darted to the cars speeding past. Horns blared as drivers craned their necks but kept moving. No one stopped. Nobody wanted to involve themselves in a woman's suffering. They were too busy, too cold, too afraid. He hesitated, then stood up. I'm sorry, miss. I can't. My wife's waiting." "I'll call someone." He hurried away, his umbrella bobbing in the storm, leaving her trembling on the pavement. Emily let out a bitter laugh that turned into a sob. The kindness of strangers lasted no more than a flicker before it gave way to fear and excuses. Society was cruel in its indifference. She was a woman in labor. abandoned by her husband, mocked by his lover, and ignored by the very people whose eyes met hers and chose to look away. Another contraction tore through her body, forcing her to her knees. The wet asphalt pressed cold against her palms, and she thought of the warm house she had just been thrown out of. Daniel's face replayed in her mind, his cruel words echoing like poison. "Die with your baby for all I care." Her chest tightened, but a spark of defiance ignited in her heart. She couldn't give him that satisfaction. She wouldn't let her child's first cry be silenced by his betrayal. Emily forced herself upright, gripping a lamppost for balance. Each step was agony, but she kept moving. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but her mind whispered one word over and over: survive. The rain drenched her hair, plastering it to her face. Her clothes clung to her body, heavy with water. People passed, glancing and then hurrying faster. A woman tugged her child away as if Emily were a disease. A young man muttered, "Crazy woman," under his breath, before disappearing into the night. Alone. So utterly alone. But deep inside, Emily made a promise to herself and to the life inside her. If no one will stand with me, I'll stand alone. If the world turns its back, I'll carve my own way forward. The contractions were closer now, sharper, more demanding. She knew she had little time left. The hospital was still blocks away. Could she make it? Her legs trembled, her body screamed, but she pushed forward into the storm. Each step became a declaration that she would not break. She might have been discarded, but she refused to be destroyed. As her vision darkened and her strength faltered, she collapsed once more, this time into the arms of a stranger who didn't walk away. A woman's voice cried out urgently, "Hold on, sweetheart! You're not alone anymore." Warmth. That was the first thing Emily felt when she came to, a sharp contrast to the storm that had nearly swallowed her. Her head rested against something soft, and a gentle hand smoothed the wet hair from her forehead. "Shh, you're safe now," a woman's voice murmured. Emily blinked, her vision clearing enough to see the face above her. A woman in her 40s, with kind brown eyes and worry etched across her features, leaned over her. She wore a nurse's jacket, though clearly off-duty, and her clothes were as drenched as Emily's. "You're going into labor, aren't you?" the woman asked, urgency lacing her tone. Emily nodded weakly, biting back a cry, as another contraction clenched her body. The woman glanced over her shoulder. "My husband's getting the car. We'll get you to the hospital. Just hold on for me, sweetheart. What's your name?" "E? Emily." "I'm Maria," the woman said firmly. "And I'm not leaving you. Do you understand? You're not alone anymore." Those words, simple, steady, were like a lifeline. For the first time that night, Emily let herself believe she might survive this. Within minutes, Maria's husband pulled up in an old sedan. He rushed out, holding an umbrella. "Come on, let's get her inside." Emily was carefully lifted into the back seat, her body trembling as the contractions grew sharper. Maria climbed in beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Breathe with me, Emily. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. You're doing so well." Emily clutched Maria's hand, tears streaming down her face, not just from pain, but from gratitude. This woman didn't know her. She had no reason to stop in the rain, to risk her own comfort for a stranger. And yet here she was, steady and strong, when everyone else had turned away. The drive to the hospital blurred into flashes of light and sound. Emily focused on Maria's voice, calm and encouraging, drowning out the storm outside and the storm inside her. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. Hold on. Your baby's waiting to meet you, and you're going to show that child just how fierce a mother can be." Something shifted inside Emily in that moment. For hours she had felt broken, discarded like garbage. But Maria's words reminded her that she wasn't nothing. She was about to become a mother, and that was power in itself. The hospital lights came into view, glowing like a promise. Maria squeezed her hand. "See that? You made it. You're not done fighting yet, sweetheart. This is just the beginning." Emily exhaled shakily, her fear turning into fragile determination. If she could survive this night, she could survive anything. She would rise again, not just for herself, but for the tiny life inside her. As they wheeled her into the emergency room, Emily screamed in agony. Just as Daniel and Claire strolled past the hospital doors, laughing together, unaware of the storm about to turn on them. The delivery room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Emily's screams echoed against the white walls as the nurses worked quickly, guiding her through the storm of contractions. Hours passed like minutes, and at last, the room was filled with the piercing cry of new life. Her son. Tears streaked Emily's cheeks as the nurse laid the tiny, swaddled bundle against her chest. His face was red, his cries urgent, but when she whispered, "Mommy's here," his sobs softened. It was in that moment, weak, exhausted, but alive, that Emily realized she had been given a reason to fight. For him, she would endure anything. For him, she would rise. But not everyone in her world shared that joy. Days later, as Emily rested in her hospital bed, the door opened and in swept her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Callahan. Their expressions were cold, their footsteps sharp, their eyes scanning the room like inspectors rather than family. Her mother's lips pursed. "So it's true. You had the child." Emily straightened, clutching her baby closer. "Yes, Mom. His name is Noah." Her father's voice was flat, dripping with disdain. "You've brought shame to this family, Emily. First, marrying that man, and now this spectacle. Your husband has already moved on with someone respectable, and you're left clinging to a bastard child." The word hit like a slap. Emily's arms tightened protectively around her son. "Don't you dare call him that." Her mother stepped closer, her perfume suffocating. "We came with papers. Custody papers. Sign them, and we'll raise the child properly. You've proven you can't be trusted with responsibility." Emily's chest tightened, her heart pounding in disbelief. "You're asking me to give up my son?" Her father's gaze hardened. "No, Emily, we're telling you. The Callahan name carries weight. We won't let you ruin it further with your foolish choices. If you love this child, you'll do what's best and put him in our care. Sign the papers." Emily's hands shook as she looked down at Noah, his tiny fingers curling around hers. For years, she had been silent, obedient, the daughter molded by control and wealth. But something inside her had changed the night Daniel threw her out. The indifference of strangers, the compassion of Maria, the cry of her newborn. They had forged a strength she never knew she had. Her voice trembled but did not break. "No, he's mine. And I won't sign anything." Her mother's eyes flashed with fury. "You'll regret this rebellion, Emily. You're nothing without us. Nothing without our name, our money, our protection. Remember that." The words echoed like a curse as her parents turned and stormed out, leaving silence in their wake. Emily held Noah tighter, her tears falling onto his soft skin. For the first time, she felt the weight of her parents' betrayal. Not just their lack of love, but their willingness to strip her of everything, even her child. But what they didn't know was that someone else, someone long gone, had left behind a secret trust that would soon shatter every illusion of control the Callahans held over her. The nights were the hardest. Alone in a small rented room above a laundromat, Emily sat rocking Noah as the moonlight spilled across cracked walls. The cries came often, sometimes sharp with hunger, sometimes soft with restless dreams, but Emily welcomed them. Every cry was proof her son was alive, and every time she soothed him, she felt herself being reborn. Gone were the silks of her family home, the polished marble floors, and the cold stares of her parents. Gone was the suburban house where Daniel and Claire now flaunted their new life. All Emily had was a child's crib bought second-hand, a single dresser, and a heart stitched together with determination. And it was enough. Each morning, she rose before the sun, bundling Noah against her chest. She cleaned rooms at a roadside motel, took shifts at a diner, and accepted odd sewing jobs from neighbors. The work left her hands cracked and her back aching, but the sight of Noah's gummy smile at the end of the day made every sacrifice worth it. The people around her noticed. Mrs. Thompson, the old woman across the hall, would slip Emily bags of groceries with a wink. "You're stronger than you know, girl. Don't ever forget that." The diner manager, gruff and impatient with everyone else, made sure Emily got the shifts that paid the most tips. "Hardest worker I've seen in years," he muttered once, pretending not to care. Those acts of kindness, small but steady, began to rebuild her faith in humanity. For every cold shoulder she had known, there were hands willing to lift her just enough to keep going. Motherhood sharpened Emily's will like a blade. She learned how to stretch a dollar until it screamed, how to soothe fevers with home remedies, how to smile at Noah when the world felt unbearably heavy. Each trial was no longer a burden. It was a lesson, a step toward becoming someone stronger than the broken girl who had once begged at Daniel's feet. Late one night, after Noah finally drifted to sleep, Emily sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. She thought of Daniel's laughter as he had closed the door on her. She thought of her parents' voices dripping with disdain. And for the first time, she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered to herself, "They don't own me anymore. Not Daniel, not Mother, not Father. This is my life now, and I'll build it with my own hands." Her reflection in the glass no longer looked like the fragile daughter or the humiliated wife. She looked like a survivor. Emily pressed a kiss to Noah's forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay, my love. Better than okay. Someday, they'll see just how strong we've become." The very next day, a letter arrived. An official document stamped with the name of a law firm she didn't recognize. Inside lay the first whisper of the inheritance her deceased relative had left behind. The fortune that would one day change everything. The envelope sat heavy in Emily's hands. The letterhead bore the name Whitman and Cross Attorneys at Law, its seal pressed in deep navy wax. Her heart pounded as she tore it open, half afraid it was another cruel trick from her parents, another attempt to strip away what little she had left. But the words inside made her breath catch. "As per the last will and testament of your late great-uncle, Jonathan Callahan, you are named the sole beneficiary of his estate, valued at approximately $50 million. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the terms of the trust." Emily's hands trembled. Her great-uncle Jonathan, an eccentric recluse the family had barely spoken of, had been cold to most, but apparently not to her. He had seen something. He had left her not scraps, not pity, but power. Her first thought was Noah, his future, his safety. Her second was freedom. For years, Emily's parents had dangled money like chains, binding her in obedience. Daniel had once mocked her as nothing without him. But now, fate had shifted the balance. She didn't just have survival, she had a weapon. Still, she knew she couldn't rush. She had to be wise. A meeting was arranged at the lawyer's office downtown. The man who greeted her was tall, gray-haired, and calm-eyed. "Ms. Callahan," he said gently, shaking her hand. "My name is Mr. Whitman. I was your uncle's lawyer, and now I am your trustee. I promised him I would protect this inheritance until you were ready." Emily swallowed hard. "And you believe I'm ready?" Whitman studied her for a long moment. "You've already proven it by surviving what should have broken you. Jonathan trusted your strength, and so will I." Something in his voice, steady, respectful, pierced through the years of belittlement she had endured. For once, someone wasn't trying to control her. He was offering guidance, not chains. Days later, word spread like wildfire. Her parents came knocking first. They arrived at her small apartment, disgust written on their faces. "So it's true," her mother hissed. "Jonathan left you the estate. Preposterous. That money belongs to the family. Sign it over at once." Her father's tone was colder, but his eyes gleamed with greed. "You're too inexperienced to handle such responsibility, Emily." We'll manage it properly. Hand it over before you embarrass us further." Once, their commands would have crushed her. But now, holding Noah in her arms, Emily felt no fear, only resolve. "No," she said simply. Her father's jaw tightened. "Do you realize what you're saying?" "I do," Emily replied, her voice steady as steel. "I'm saying you don't control me anymore. Not my life, not my child, and certainly not my future. Leave." Her parents sputtered with outrage, but Emily shut the door in their faces before their venom could spill further. For the first time in her life, she had chosen herself. But even as Emily drew strength from her rejection of their control, Daniel was busy flaunting his new life with Claire, mocking Emily publicly, never suspecting that the woman he discarded would one day own the very empire he worshipped. Word spread quickly in their small town. Daniel and Claire whispered the story first, twisting it like a knife. At the grocery store, in the church pews, at the diner counter, everywhere Emily went, eyes followed her. Some were pitying, most were cruel. "That's the girl whose husband left her. Did you hear? He kicked her out while she was in labor. She must have done something terrible to deserve it. Now she's trying to raise a child on her own. Pathetic." Each murmur dug at her pride, but Emily learned to walk past them with her chin high. She couldn't waste energy on gossip when Noah's hungry cries and midnight fevers demanded her attention. Society had always loved to tear down women in pain. It was nothing new. Even when news of her inheritance leaked, the judgment didn't stop. If anything, it grew sharper. She doesn't deserve that money. She'll waste it, just like she wasted her marriage. Rich or poor, she's still the girl who got thrown out. Emily said nothing. She let them talk. For every whisper behind her back, she poured herself deeper into building a foundation for her and Noah. With Whitman's guidance, she began to take small steps into the business world. She learned about the trust, investments, and real estate tied to her uncle's fortune. She didn't announce her wealth. She didn't flaunt it. She worked silently, absorbing every detail, every lesson. At home, her strength showed in quieter ways. Noah grew, his tiny steps becoming bold, his laughter filling their modest rooms. Each time he ran to her with open arms, Emily felt her resilience sharpen. He was her reason to endure the judgment, her proof that love could exist even after betrayal. Meanwhile, Daniel and Claire flaunted their perfect marriage in public. They posed at galas, posted smiling pictures, and whispered in corners about how much better life was without Emily dragging him down. To the world, they seemed untouchable. But Emily saw the cracks. At one gala she attended, quietly as an heiress in disguise, she caught Claire whispering to another man, her smile just a little too intimate. Daniel, drunk with arrogance, didn't notice. He only saw himself reflected in the admiration of others. Emily said nothing. She didn't need to. Patience was her weapon now. Society could mock her. Daniel could flaunt his hollow happiness. Claire could preen in her borrowed glory. Emily endured it all in silence, knowing that endurance wasn't weakness. It was preparation. Because sometimes the greatest strength is not in shouting back, but in waiting for the moment when truth reveals itself. And that moment drew closer when Daniel's arrogance reached its peak. Mocking Emily publicly in a cruel spectacle that would leave the entire town watching her humiliation, unaware that she was the one holding the ultimate card. The town's annual charity banquet was the event of the season, a glittering night where the wealthy paraded their fortunes and the less fortunate gawked at the spectacle. Emily had no intention of attending, but Whitman insisted. "Appearances matter," he reminded her. "Your uncle's estate has placed you among the city's elite, whether you like it or not. Best they see you on your own terms." So Emily came, wearing a simple black dress. She didn't sparkle like the others, didn't drape herself in jewels, yet heads turned anyway. There was something about her presence now, calm, steady, untouchable. Daniel and Claire, however, arrived like royalty. Claire shimmered in a gold gown, her fingers flashing with rings Daniel could barely afford. Daniel himself strutted in a tuxedo, his arm locked around her waist as if to show the world he had traded up. The whispers started immediately. "There's Daniel, finally rid of the dead weight. Claire looks stunning, doesn't she? And Emily? Poor thing. Look at her, sitting alone." Emily ignored the whispers. She sipped her water, watching quietly from her corner table. But Daniel wasn't content with silence. Halfway through the evening, he stood at the podium to give a toast. His voice carried through the grand hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, isn't life about second chances? About finding the right partner when you've wasted years with the wrong one?" The crowd chuckled, their laughter echoing like knives. Claire leaned against him, her smile polished. "To new beginnings," she purred into the microphone, her eyes flashing toward Emily. Daniel smirked, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on his ex-wife. "To leaving behind mistakes and building something better." The audience roared with approval. Glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, and all eyes turned to Emily, waiting for her reaction. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her glass slightly and took a sip, her expression unreadable. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But deep inside, her resolve hardened. Daniel thought this was victory, public humiliation, the final nail in her coffin. What he didn't realize was that every cruel word only fueled the fire within her. Because Emily wasn't the same woman he had cast into the rain. She wasn't begging anymore. She wasn't powerless. She had patience, strategy, and a future bigger than his pride could ever imagine. As the banquet carried on, Emily slipped away early, unnoticed by most. The laughter followed her out the door, but she didn't crumble this time. She whispered to herself, steady and sure, "Enjoy your moment, Daniel. It's the last one you'll ever have at my expense." What Daniel and Claire didn't know was that Emily had already begun moving her inheritance strategically, acquiring quiet shares in the very company Daniel's career depended on. Soon, their mockery would turn into horror. Emily had learned something from her years of humiliation. The most dangerous strength was the one hidden in silence. She didn't rush to confront Daniel, didn't throw her fortune in his face. Instead, she built patiently, piece by piece, brick by brick. With Whitman's guidance, she began investing her inheritance. Not in flashy cars or sprawling mansions. Daniel and Claire could keep those. Emily bought power. First, she purchased shares in Callahan Industries, her family's proud legacy. Her parents had always assumed control was theirs alone. But the shares Jonathan left her gave her a quiet but significant stake. With every acquisition Whitman guided her through, her influence grew like roots spreading underground. Next, she looked to Daniel's career. He had joined a rising tech company, one he flaunted as proof of his success. He often bragged at parties, "We're going public in 3 years. I'll be a millionaire before you know it." Emily didn't just listen, she acted. Through silent shell accounts managed by Whitman, she began acquiring stock. She learned the board members' names, their priorities, their weaknesses. She attended meetings as a quiet observer. The heiress widow few took seriously. And she smiled, listening, waiting. At home her life was humble but full. Noah, now a toddler, toddled into her arms after each long day, his laughter chasing away the shadows of the past. Emily drew strength from motherhood, but also from strategy. Her son gave her purpose. Her fortune gave her leverage, but patience gave her power. Daniel, meanwhile, strutted through life with arrogance unshaken. He spent freely, bragged loudly, and dismissed Emily as the ghost of his mistakes. Claire basked in the glow. Flashing diamonds she hinted Daniel had bought her, though in truth they were gifts she demanded from his dwindling accounts. The town saw only the surface. Daniel, the charmer. Claire, the beauty. Emily, the quiet shadow. But under the surface, the scales had already begun to shift. One evening, Emily sat with Whitman in his office, papers spread across the mahogany desk. "You're not just surviving anymore," he told her. "You're positioning yourself. Daniel doesn't see it, your parents don't see it, But you're building something much larger than any of them can imagine. Do you understand what this means? Emily nodded slowly, her voice calm. It means I don't have to fight them in the mud. I can wait. Because when they fall, they'll fall on their own, and I'll be there to make sure they never rise again. Her words surprised even herself. Once she had been the woman begging on her knees. Now she was a strategist, her silence sharper than any insult Daniel could throw. And cracks were already forming in Daniel's golden marriage, because while he paraded Claire as his prize, she had secrets of her own. Secrets that would soon begin to unravel everything. The cracks in Daniel's shiny marriage began as whispers, subtle, almost invisible to those who weren't looking. But Emily noticed. She always noticed. At first, it was Claire's laughter at parties, too loud, too intimate, when whispered in the ear of another man. Then it was the way she lingered on her phone late at night, the screen lighting up with messages she quickly tucked away. Daniel, drunk with pride and arrogance, brushed it off. He was too busy admiring himself in the mirror of society's applause. But karma never forgets. One evening, while Emily tucked Noah into bed, she received a message from a woman she barely knew. It was short and sharp. You don't know me, but I thought you should see this. Claire isn't faithful. She's been meeting someone else. Check tonight's gala photos. You'll see. Emily didn't respond, but curiosity pushed her to look. Online, she found the pictures. Daniel stood grinning, glass raised in another self-congratulatory toast. But in the background of another shot, Claire leaned close to a well-dressed man, her hand on his chest, her lips dangerously near his ear. The town gossips noticed, too. Did you see Claire with that banker? She's been spotted downtown, late dinners, no Daniel in sight. Maybe Daniel's not the only one who can trade up. The same voices that once mocked Emily now whispered about Daniel's humiliation. And Emily? She stayed silent, watching from the shadows. At home, Daniel began to unravel. His charm thinned into paranoia. Where were you? He demanded of Claire late at night, his voice slurred from whiskey. Who were you texting? Claire only smirked, her tone like poisoned honey. Don't be ridiculous, darling. You're imagining things. But the lipstick on her collar told another story. So did the hotel bills Daniel couldn't explain away. For years, he had thrown venom at Emily, branding her as worthless, weak, disposable. Now he tasted his own medicine. The wife he had paraded as his triumph was slowly betraying him, and she didn't even try very hard to hide it. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply watched. Patience her armor, knowing that every fracture in Daniel's marriage was the echo of what he had once done to her. And still, she kept moving quietly, strengthening her position in business, building alliances, ensuring that when Daniel finally fell, she would not only witness it, she would control the stage on which it happened. And soon, that stage would arrive, because Daniel's company was heading into its most important board meeting yet, unaware that the woman he had once thrown into the rain now held the deciding vote. The Callahan estate loomed like a monument to cold power, columns stretching toward the sky, manicured lawns hiding years of whispered cruelty. Emily hadn't stepped foot inside since her parents had stormed out of her hospital room, demanding custody of Noah. Now, she returned not as a broken daughter, but as a woman carrying her own name, her own power. Whitman walked beside her, his presence steady. Remember, he said softly, you owe them nothing. Not explanation, not obedience, not forgiveness. Today, you draw the line. Inside, the air smelled the same as it always had, expensive polish masking rot. Her mother sat rigidly in an armchair, pearls gleaming at her throat, while her father stood near the fireplace, posture stiff, eyes sharp. So, her father began, voice dripping with false civility, the prodigal daughter returns. Come to your senses, have you? Emily took a seat across from them, her hands folded calmly. No, I came to tell you this ends today. Your control over me, Your threats, your attempts to take my son, all of it." Her mother scoffed, her lips curling. "We raised you. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By throwing away tradition, family, duty." "You didn't raise me," Emily said, her voice low but firm. "You trained me, molded me to be silent, obedient, useful. But you never loved me, and you will never touch my son." Her father's face darkened. "You think your money makes you powerful? Don't forget who made you, Emily." Something inside her snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. She met his glare without flinching. "You didn't make me. You tried to break me. But everything I am now, strong, free, unafraid, I built that in spite of you, not because of you." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Her parents weren't used to defiance, least of all from the daughter they had spent years silencing. Her mother's voice cracked like glass. "You'll regret this. When society turns its back, when that fortune crumbles, you'll crawl back to us." Emily stood, her expression calm, almost pitying. "No, Mother. The only thing I regret is ever believing your love was real." She turned toward the door, Whitman following. Behind her, her parents shouted, their voices echoing through the hollow mansion. But Emily didn't stop. Each step away felt like a weight lifting, chains falling one by one. Outside, she breathed deeply, the air sharp and free. For the first time, she was no longer their daughter, no longer bound by their name. She was Emily, Noah's mother, Jonathan's heir, her own woman. Whitman gave her a small nod. That was liberation, not from them, but from the lie they built around you. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with new fire. "And I'll never let anyone chain me again." But even as Emily broke free from her family, Daniel's empire was beginning to collapse, his arrogance crumbling under betrayal, debt, and the same whispers of judgment he once threw at her. Daniel had always believed himself untouchable. He walked into every room like the world owed him applause, like betrayal was a sport, and women were pawns. But power built on cruelty has cracks, and Daniel's cracks had grown into canyons. It began with Claire. Her late-night absences became impossible to ignore. Rumors swirled around town, whispers of her dinners with a wealthy banker, her trips to the city without Daniel. He demanded answers, but Claire only laughed. "You didn't mind cheating when it was with me, did you?" The words cut deeper than Daniel expected. For once, he was the one left questioning, doubting, burning with jealousy. His paranoia drove him to drink, his charm slipping into bitter rants at parties. Where he once held the spotlight, people now exchanged knowing looks behind his back. Then came the company blow. At a quarterly board meeting, Daniel proudly presented a risky expansion plan, only to watch it crumble in front of him. The majority, led silently by Emily's shares, voted against him. His allies shifted in their seats, avoiding his glare. Investors began to doubt him. For the first time, Daniel's golden tongue failed to save him. The humiliation spread fast. Hayes isn't as sharp as he thinks. Losing control of his own company, can you believe it? His wife's stepping out on him too. Karma, I suppose. Daniel stormed through the halls of his office, slamming doors, firing staff in bursts of rage. But anger couldn't stop the bleeding. His fortune thinned, his influence waned, and the man who once sneered at Emily's weakness found himself begging for support. One night, stumbling home drunk, Daniel confronted Claire. "Are you seeing him?" he demanded, fists clenched. Claire tilted her head, her smile sharp as glass. "And what if I am? What can you do about it? You're broke, Daniel. Pathetic. You couldn't even keep your company together. Why should I tie myself to a sinking ship?" The words shattered him. His trophy wife, his symbol of triumph, had reduced him to nothing with a single sentence. Meanwhile, Emily's silence grew louder. She didn't need to expose him. He was unraveling on his own. Every cruel word he had ever thrown at her now echoed back in his own life. Alone, mocked, betrayed. Daniel sat in his darkened house one evening, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. His reflection in the window looked hollow, desperate. He whispered the words he had once spat at Emily. "You're nothing." Only now he said them to himself. And the final blow was yet to come. Because soon the truth of his betrayal, Claire's infidelity, and Emily's hidden strength would explode in the public eye, leaving Daniel stripped of everything. The night of the annual Shareholders' Gala was meant to showcase Daniel's triumphs. He strode onto the stage in his polished tuxedo, forcing his usual confident grin. But the cracks in his life had grown too deep to hide. Whispers rippled through the crowd before he even spoke. "Did you hear about Claire? Apparently, she's been seen all over town with that banker. And Daniel's losing control of the company. Emily Callahan owns half of it now." The name made Daniel flinch. He tried to silence the noise with a booming speech, promising new growth and unshakable leadership. But midway through, the room stirred again, not because of him, but because the doors opened and Emily entered. Heads turned, murmurs swelled. She walked with calm grace, a navy gown flowing behind her, Whitman at her side. Unlike Daniel, she didn't need a spotlight. Her presence commanded the room. Daniel's voice faltered. "What is she—" The chairman stepped up, microphone in hand. "Tonight we welcome our majority shareholder, Ms. Emily Callahan." Applause thundered. Daniel's face burned crimson. Emily took the stage, her gaze steady, her voice clear. "This company deserves leadership built on integrity, not arrogance. For too long, decisions were made recklessly, for ego rather than vision. That ends tonight." Gasps spread through the audience. Cameras flashed. Daniel lunged toward her, his voice cracking. "You're lying! You're trying to ruin me!" But Emily didn't waver. She raised a folder, its pages spilling evidence gathered quietly with Whitman's help. Daniel's reckless spending, fraudulent contracts, even his misuse of company funds to shower Claire with luxuries. The board erupted. Investors hissed. Reporters scribbled furiously. And then came the final blow. Claire herself. Dressed in dazzling red, she sauntered to the stage, her smile sharp. "He's not lying about one thing," she purred into the microphone. "This man is a fraud and a fool. While he wasted his life chasing money, I found better." She slipped her arm through the banker's waiting hand, the entire room gasping. Daniel's world shattered. His wife had betrayed him publicly. His company had turned against him, and the woman he once discarded stood tall above him, untouchable. Security escorted him from the stage as Emily's voice rang out. "This is justice, not revenge." The truth always comes to light, and when it does, lies crumble under their own weight. The audience erupted in applause. Emily stood tall, her dignity restored, her power undeniable. Daniel, once the arrogant oppressor, left the gala broken, his marriage exposed, his career in ruins, his name a stain whispered in shame. And as Emily stepped down from the stage, holding her head high, she knew the final chapter awaited. Not in Daniel's destruction, but in her own freedom, dignity, and the life she would build beyond the shadows of betrayal. Morning sunlight spilled into Emily's home. A home she had chosen, not one imposed by her parents or shaped by Daniel's ego. The walls were painted in warm tones, laughter echoed through the rooms, and the air smelled of fresh coffee and Noah's crayons scattered across the floor. It wasn't a mansion like the Callahan estate. It wasn't filled with marble or chandeliers, but it was hers. Every corner, every color, every piece of furniture told the story of her survival, her choices, her freedom. Noah ran into the kitchen, his little feet pattering on the floor. "Mommy, look!" He held up a crayon drawing, a stick-figure family with a bright sun overhead. In the middle, a woman held hands with a little boy. Above her head, in shaky letters, he had written, "Mommy strong, Tears pricked Emily's eyes, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of victory. She knelt down, hugging Noah tightly. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy is strong, and so are you." For years, Emily had lived under chains. Chains of her parents' control, of Daniel's cruelty, of society's judgment. But each betrayal, each humiliation, had forged her into something stronger. She had risen from the rain-soaked streets with nothing but her will, and now she stood as a leader, a mother, a woman who owned her dignity again. Daniel, meanwhile, had vanished into obscurity. Bankrupt, abandoned, mocked, he was a cautionary tale whispered at dinner tables. Claire, disgraced and exposed, found doors closing faster than she could knock. And Emily? She didn't waste a thought on them. Their downfall was their own doing. Her life was no longer defined by their shadows. Whitman visited often, bringing updates on her growing empire. But he never spoke as if she owed him. He spoke with respect, as a trusted advisor, as her late uncle had intended. Jonathan's fortune hadn't been a gift. It had been a test, a trust placed in her hands to see if she would rise. And she had. One evening, Emily stood on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky. She thought of the girl she once was, the one sobbing in the rain, begging for mercy, discarded like nothing. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had reclaimed everything that mattered. Her voice, her freedom, her dignity. She whispered into the wind, as if speaking to her uncle, to every stranger who had helped her, and to the shadows of the past. "Thank you for breaking me, because in breaking me, you taught me how to rebuild." And then, with Noah's laughter filling the air, Emily closed the door on the past forever. Sometimes, the ones who are humiliated rise with more power than their oppressors could ever imagine. Sometimes, the woman you cast into the rain becomes the storm that washes your name away. Emily was no longer the betrayed wife. She was the empowered leader. The cycle was broken,